But this deal delivers the broadest security partnership in the EU's history, including arrangements for effective data exchange on passenger name records, DNA, fingerprints and vehicle registration data, as well as extradition arrangements like those in the European arrest warrant. And it opens the way to sharing the types of information included in the ECRIS and SIS2 databases on wanted or missing persons and criminal records. Mr. Speaker, this has been a long and complex negotiation. It has required give and take on both sides, and that is the nature of a negotiation. But this deal honours the result of the referendum, while providing a close economic and security relationship with our nearest neighbours, and in so doing offers a brighter future for the British people outside of the EU. And I can say to the House with absolute certainty that there is not a better deal available. And my fellow leaders were very clear on that themselves yesterday. Our duty as a Parliament over these coming weeks is to examine this deal in detail, to debate it respectfully, to listen to our constituents and decide what is in our national interest. There is a choice which this House will have to make. We can back this deal, deliver on the vote of the referendum, and move on to building a brighter future of opportunity and prosperity for all our people.
Brexit live. Remainers plot new bid to stop Brexit with another Commons motion. Remainer MPs are plotting to corner the Prime Minister into fast-tracking a Brexit Plan B if she loses next week's meaningful vote. A cross-party group of anti-no-deal Brexit MPs will try to force Theresa May's hand this afternoon by tabling an amendment to the Brexit debate business. If the meaningful vote on the Brexit deal is lost next week, it must be held again 3 days later, under the motion. If MPs vote for the motion, it will cut Prime Minister's breathing space from 21 days, plus 7 sitting days which she is currently relying on to conjure a backup option. The amendment is being led by rebel Tory MPs fighting against a no-deal Brexit, including Dominic Grieve, Anna Soubry and Sir Oliver Loon. The motion piles yet more pressure on Theresa May, who faces a mountain of opposition to every Brexit plan. Last night she suffered her 4th defeat in as many weeks as her grip on Brexit continues to slip. A 3-line whip was broken by 20 of the Prime Minister-owned MPs, including 7 former cabinet ministers, who defied Theresa May and voted to restrict her powers if Britain leaves the EU without a deal. With just 79 days to go until Brexit Day, March 29, Sir Oliver told MPs the group of rebels will thwart every attempt to leave the EU without a deal. Sir Oliver said, "I want to make it abundantly clear that a majority in this House will not allow a no-deal exit to occur at the end of March." While fellow Tory MP Nick Boles indicated he would even conspire with Labour to block Theresa May pursuing no deal. Former Minister Mr Boles said, "I will vote on any motion, on any amendment, on any piece of legislation, proposed by whomsoever in this House, to ensure that we leave the EU on March 29 with a deal or not at all." Mr Heaton-Harris, a prominent Brexiteer, was quizzed further on why he thinks no deal is suboptimal, despite being a staunch Leave campaigner. When asked why he would prefer a deal than no deal, he said, "That's a terrible question to ask a good Eurosceptic. I just think it would be much better to have a deal that satisfies European friendships and allows them to continue in an uninterrupted basis, be it for trade, tourism, whatever it might be." Optimal and no deal is suboptimal. When asked about what the 1,000 police officers being trained to head to Northern Ireland in the event of a no deal were for, Mr Heaton-Harris denied the move was Brexit related. The minister bizarrely tried to explain the extra police numbers were to cope with marching season instead. Mr. Heaton-Harris said, "There's often a rise in police numbers as you head towards marching season." A bemused chair of the Brexit Select Committee responded, "The marching season? Sorry, did you say marching season?" Audible laughter was heard among members present before the chair continued, "Well, that's been the year before that. My understanding was that this is specifically to provide assistance in the event of no deal." Mr. Heaton-Harris replied, "I don't believe that is the case. Marching season is an important part of Northern Irish culture as parades march throughout towns across the country in support of various causes including commemorations, remembrance, St. Patrick's Day." Quizzed further by SNP committee member Peter Grant, Mr. Heaton-Harris continued to say he did not know why police numbers in Northern Ireland were increasing. Mr. Grant said, "You don't seriously believe that, do you?" The Brexit minister responded, "I do not know why the extra numbers are going into Northern Ireland, but it's a regular occurrence that numbers are inflated." Brexit Parliamentary Under Secretary Chris Heaton-Harris is defending the government's Brexit preparations. The Daventry MP has described no deal as suboptimal, but explained a reasonable government must prepare for the scenario. He said, "We want to get the deal over the line. It's the best route forward, but obviously if there is no deal passed by this House then we would leave without a deal, so a reasonable government has to prepare for that." Asked whether the government would have to hand over some of the £39 billion bill agreed in the Brexit divorce deal, Mr. Heaton-Harris admitted the UK would still be liable to pay the EU. He said, "Some of it would have to be because there are legal obligations that we would have. We've had thousands of civil servants working Europe, there's lots of pension liability. But it would be nowhere near the billions quoted. We would have to pay the debts we are legally required to pay but no more." The Chancellor has responded to the Treasury Select Committee report by explaining the Bank of England published analysis assessing how the EU exit could affect the UK economy over the 5 years after Brexit. He added the backstop is an insurance policy which he hopes will not be used but is necessary if the UK's future relationship with the EU has not been agreed by the end of the implementation period. Remainer demands for a second Brexit referendum cannot be ignored if Theresa May's divorce deal is voted down, campaigners have warned. The People's Vote campaign said ministers will have to listen to them and give the British people another say as they plot to force another referendum. In a report published by the campaign group, they acknowledged there was not yet a majority in the Commons supporting another vote, but added momentum was growing, and they were confident more MPs will back a second referendum soon to end the Brexit deadlock. With the Prime Minister facing opposition from both pro-Leave and pro-Remain Tories, the People's Vote group is hoping another Brexit vote will settle the issue. The report said, far from the government being able to resist pressure for a people's vote, the reality is that if a majority of MPs are prepared to vote for it, they will have a series of opportunities to encourage or even force the government to produce the necessary legislation. The report was backed by Lord Kerr of Kinlochard, a former diplomat who helped draft the Article 50 process, who said, "There now is a withdrawal deal on the table and it hasn't been well received. Parliament has made it clear that it will intervene to prevent a no-deal Brexit. There is a viable third option: we could retain the deal we already have as a full member of the EU. Parliament can step in to insist that the people should have the right to decide." Labour has confirmed it will demand a no-confidence vote in the Prime Minister if she loses next week's meaningful vote. MPs will vote on the Withdrawal Agreement next Tuesday, and Shadow International Trade Secretary Barry Gardiner said Labour are ready to immediately table a no-confidence motion if Theresa May does not win. Mr. Gardner told BBC Radio 4's Today programme, "We're now talking as if it is expected that the government next Tuesday will be defeated on the most important piece of legislation that has come before Parliament probably in 50 or more years, that the government has devoted 2 years of its time to try to negotiate, and we're now almost accepting that this will simply be defeated and voted down. Obviously, the next thing to do immediately after that is for there to be a vote of confidence in the government." Mr. Gardner added the appropriate time to table the no-confidence vote would be when the government loses its key legislation and no longer commands a majority in the House of Commons. Today is set to be a busy Brexit day in Westminster as MPs begin 5 days of debates ahead of next week's meaningful vote, but there is plenty more happening too. All eyes will be on the Prime Minister for her weekly PMQs from 12 p.m. Before that, the Commons Treasury Committee is expected to publish the Chancellor's response to its withdrawal agreement at 9 a.m. From 9:15 a.m. Department for Exiting the European Union Minister Chris Heaton-Harris will give evidence to the Brexit Select Committee about how the government is preparing for no deal. At 11:30 a.m. the post-Brexit future of student exchange programs Erasmus and Horizon will be scrutinised as the EU Home Affairs Subcommittee quizzes Universities Minister Chris Skidmore. The Brexit deal debate begins at 1 p.m., beginning with the business motion, after which Brexit Secretary Stephen Barclay will open the debate. From 5 p.m., Home Secretary Sajid Javid will address the Conservatives governing 1922 committee. Theresa May's de facto deputy has warned MPs plotting to vote down the withdrawal agreement that a new Brexit deal is a delusion. Cabinet Office Minister David Lidington said Theresa May's blueprint was all that is on offer from the EU, and Brexiteers saying a different deal can be negotiated are doing a disservice to the British public. Mr. Lidington told BBC Radio, "I don't think the British public are served by fantasies about magical, alternative deals that are somehow going to spring out of cupboard in Brussels. This deal on the table has involved some very difficult give and take on both sides.